Good afternoon, members, and welcome to the June meeting of the Education and Learning Committee. Can I remind members that the meeting will be live streamed, recorded and subsequently made available to the public for viewing purposes. In terms of use of the remote, and members who wish to speak, write chat in the chat function, or if you can't do that, put the hands up. It's a lot easier if we have the chat function because at least I know who you are. I give my approval to members' remote participation. Do we have any said written apologies? Tracy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members. We've currently got 18 members present. I have apologies from Councillor Jim McComb. Thank you.
Ms. Tracy? Do any members have any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing anything. So if we move to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of May this year. Members happy to approve these?
Agreed.
Can I just say that I did, as agreed under item 6, write to the Chair and Chief Executive of the SQA, raising the concerns over the lack of support to young people in schools across the region. Members should have received a copy of the letter and the reply which I received on Thursday last week. That was sent out on Friday. It was a fairly generic response, and I think we all are aware of what's happened to the SQA since then. And the Cabinet Secretary for Education is actually making a statement in Parliament later this afternoon on what the plans are to replace the SQA. So it'll be interesting to see what those amount to. Okay. Just picking some things up in the chat function. Okay. Well, Councillor Inglis is also an apology. That's from Councillor McGregor. So can we move to agenda item 4 on page 19? Education Restart Update, report by the Director of Skills Education and Learning. The first report of this afternoon's committee provides an update since the last committee on 13th of May 2021 on the ongoing arrangements for staff and pupils in our schools since the return to schools in April. I'll hand over to Jim Brown and John Finn, who will provide a brief update on how things have been as schools move towards the end of the session, which I think we can all acknowledge has been extremely challenging. I'd like to convey this committee's thanks and gratitude to all staff who work tirelessly to ensure our children and young people have still been provided with the best outcomes possible. So Jim, over to you.
Many thanks, Jeff. That's gratefully received. Well, good afternoon all. It's very nice to see you all again. I think probably worthwhile before we go into business proper, I thought it'd be appropriate to reflect on the past year, which has certainly been one of the most difficult and draining for most of us. What I can say without a second's hesitation is to repeat what Jeff has said, how proud and grateful we are for the work of everyone associated with education and learning in Dumfries and Galloway. Schools' early learning settings worked throughout last year, which of course started on the tails of the first lockdown. Staff, parents, young people, relieved to be back. I think our people need to be genuinely commended on how they responded to the second lockdown, both in terms of the optimism shown, as well as the incredible flexibility of learning approaches that we used, both by staff and young people. Certainly further to this, the way that schools have responded to the need to generate evidence so that we could ourselves evaluate senior phase pupils' success against SQA exam criteria has been exemplary and has been commended by Scottish Government. In practice, what this has meant is that classroom teachers have been exam setters, exam moderators and exam markers, and that work has been outstanding. We want to offer our sincere gratitude to staff, pupils parents and carers for the hard work and the mutual support this year. And we want to wish everyone a well-earned summer break. So thank you for that, Jeff.
You're on mute, Jeff.
John, do you want to add to that?
So yeah, thank you, Chair and members. I'll be very, very brief, and then if it's with everyone's permission, I'll put on a very short video which will show some of our probationer teachers at the end of their first year, just to give a bit of a reflection of what it's been like back in the classroom. But clearly we are in a very tricky period, I suppose, in terms of the year. It's been the most disruptive of years in memory. And longer probably, and as we approach the end of the session, it still remains a significant challenge to ensure that we're continuing to mitigate against some of the challenges that COVID brings. This week, has been a particularly busy week, and we are seeing some increases across the piece, which is again testament, as Jim has said, in terms of our schools, in terms of mitigation and the impacts that we've been able to put in place in the risk assessments and safer working practices that have been implemented in our schools has meant that transmission rate has been exceptionally low within our schools, but clearly we are subject to those community challenges round about it as well. So it's work in progress. We certainly don't rest on our laurels, and we'll continue to provide the support to our schools up till the end of this week and beyond, because we will no doubt have some of the tail of this still to work with throughout the summer, and we look forward to the new session with renewed vigour and hopefully with a much lower incidence rate of the COVID virus in our system. So without too much further ado, I'll share my screen, and just to give you a little bit of an update. So this is really a focus in one of the areas on the restart paper, and given the nature of this year's challenges that all probationers have faced, the General Teaching Council every year have a sort of, feel like a probationer of the year. I'm not particularly keen on that kind of phrase, because I think all of our probationers and all of our teachers indeed do particularly good jobs in our schools. However, this year they decided to hold a very different national probationer celebration event, and prior to the event, probationers from all over Scotland, the local authorities, were asked to create and submit videos outlining their experiences of this year. And we were fortunate enough to have 3 probationers who volunteered to represent Dumfries and Galloway. Ben Wilde from Kirkcudbright Primary School, Hannah Sharp from St Columba's Primary School, and Rebecca Cummings from Noble Hill Primary School have all shared their reflections of the last year. And we're very grateful to them all for doing that. On Tuesday the 8th and Wednesday the 9th of June, the videos were released via the GTCS website and via a number of posts on Twitter. And on Thursday the 10th of June, all probationers, supporters and trainee induction managers were invited to an online celebration in recognition of all their brilliant achievements. So with members' approval, I'll share these videos. They'll last about 5 minutes, members.
Can't hear it, John.
No sound.
Could you hear that? Or you wouldn't be able to hear it? Any thoughts, Larry?
You share the screen with
Yeah,
microphone on when it's playing, and then it plays it through yours.
microphone's on, speakers are on.
Yeah, you want to see if we can get it outside.
It's not coming through right, John. I think you should have got the probationers in, John.
Right.
We still don't have any sound, John. John, shall we go to members' questions on the paper and then come back to the video if it's working?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not quite sure why that wasn't working. It was certainly working in here, and others could see it, but I'm not quite sure why it was delayed in terms of coming through to yourselves, or there was no sound. So apologies for that, members. Quite sure what the problem was.
Yeah, Elaine's just said, can you email the link out? And I certainly looked at it separately, and it was, the sound was fine on that. Okay, so I'll throw it open to members. Do you have any questions on the report? Willie?
Thanks, Jeff. And just as Jim and John and yourself have said, I would like to echo what you all have said in terms of the tremendous amount of work that has been put in by teachers and staff directorate to get some kind of return to it can be described as normality, but to have our schools open and open safely. So I want to, echo those sentiments that have been said. I think it was important. John referred to Twitter in his presentation there, and I think we're all subjected to Twitter. I don't know how to work, nor do I wish to know how Twitter works, but I do look at Facebook, and John knows, I raised this with him. As soon as anything happens, it goes on Facebook and it becomes viral. And only today, I think from yesterday through to today, I was asked the question only a few minutes ago, am I going to close the schools? And they're referring to in Stranraer, because there's been all of a sudden this outburst of COVID cases amongst the pupils. Now, I don't know what the situation is or within Stranraer, but Facebook seems to know what has happened. So I think in terms of members being kept in touch, I would like to see a more up to date, almost on the minute as it happens, because Facebook seems to get it before we even get it. And this brings me into the end of session, and John and I's had communication on this, and it's really, again, it went viral on Facebook how end of session celebrations of achievements has been a huge disappointment for school kids and parents alike. And there's been mixed messages. I've been at parent council meetings where it's been said that head teachers were instructed not to go into any celebrations and that any event was cancelled by the council. Now, John, or rather Claire Aiken, confirmed that what the schools were asked, the head teachers were asked, was to take a cautious approach on and a minimalistic consideration to what they were putting on. But that's not the message that's coming over. And I think we need clarity. We're far too late for this year. I think the schools break up on Friday. But for kids, this was a momentous occasion. Some were leaving from going on from primary to secondary. Others were leaving secondary. And these are historical occasions for years to come for all their families. And I don't think we're in any shining light as to how this has been handled in terms of communication to members. I'll leave whether it was inappropriate or appropriate for members' decision. I'll leave that stick to the wall for the moment. But I think we need some explanation or clarification, because head teachers are still saying we were told we couldn't have anything to celebrate these kids in leaving education or moving on, even down to sports events and how they could organise this.
Okay, John.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for those questions. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has been a very, very difficult period of time, and it continues to be exceptionally difficult to manage. We are now having daily IMT meetings where we're discussing emerging cases that are coming to our attention within schools. I will reiterate again, though, this is caused by community transmission, and schools are part of that wider community. And so therefore, there is a very high likelihood within the community that some of that will come into the school. And again, I will re-highlight again the good work that our schools are doing in terms of trying to mitigate as much as they possibly can, and also our health and safety team within education services and within the wider council to ensure that schools are well supported to mitigate against any risks within that. It is moving at such a rate that it's really difficult to get the key messaging. We're finding that literally on a daily basis at the moment. The things are changing. We're working very closely with our colleagues in public health, and we are absolutely advised by them in terms of any decision making, that at a local level and at a national level by the most up-to-date Scottish Government guidance, the last of which was published on the 25th of May, which we then share with our joint trade unions and our head teachers. We try to make those messages bite-sized, if you like, in terms of the understanding of those messages, but clearly things have changed and are continuing to change, as I said before, on that daily basis, and therefore we sometimes have to adapt some of that advice according to what the changes in that landscape actually look like. So I make no apology for our minimalist approach. I absolutely don't. I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. I do realise that has impacted potentially negatively on some people's experiences. However, I'd much rather that there was a smaller impact on young people's and families' experiences in terms of areas of non-essential education, if you like, in order that we continue to keep our schools open and functioning as fully as they possibly can, and viz any further impact on the wider community should any of those events have taken place with either outside agencies or indeed parents involved in some of those as well.
Thanks, John. We are in a pandemic at the moment, and it is a question of trying to keep this suppressed as far as possible. I mean, just looking at my notes, I think Eastreeks Primary is closed now, Sanker Primary is closed, P1 to 3 at Glenluce, and they're having to self-isolate, and that's just a few of the schools which are being affected. So I think people need to realise just how volatile this situation is at the moment. Come back in, Willie.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and John, thanks for your explanation. And I do appreciate that you are trying to mitigate against, you know, what could happen as we move on. And indeed, Jeff has just read out something, you know, in terms of schools. But we've got to keep on top of this communication. And it was what is minimalistic in terms of that approach to what was an instruction. And that's where the communication seems to have broken down between your meeting on the 25th of May, John, through to what was given to head teachers in terms of what could they do, what was accepted or acceptable in terms of minimalisation, so that kids still were able to celebrate. And I think that is something that I, as a member, I'll let others speak for themselves, but I, as a member, would want to know what did that actually mean in terms of could the school celebrate, how did they celebrate, you know, rather than what was coming over as it was an instruction from the council. And I think you saw some of the text messages, the post that went onto Facebook, John, and I shared that with all members. So I think there is a lesson to be learned here, and I do appreciate the steps that are being taken, the mitigation. And again, if I can only speak for Stranraer just now, because we all seem to be in bubbles, but you know, the whole Facebook seems to be the whole of Stranraer's got COVID and we've closed all the schools. Well, that's not my understanding, and I don't know what the situation is in Stranraer, although Jeff, you've read out a number of places. What is the situation in each of our areas where we represent the people? They're expecting us to be able to answer all these, and I think we need that information conveyed to us as a matter of urgency. That's my views.
I think ward members are being informed about outbreaks within their own particular ward, are they not, John?
Just
Yeah, the RRR team are providing that information on a regular basis, but as I said before, the information is changing literally. I said day by day, probably that's actually too long a period I'm now describing, because it's probably hour by hour at the moment.
Maybe I've just missed it, Jeff, but I don't remember getting anything from yesterday in terms of Stranraer.
So I get copied into emails which are going out to individual wards. Okay, so I've got Karen, Jackie and Pauline. Karen?
Fiona's never going to
Hi, Jeff.
like that.
Hi, Karen.
It's just
Hi.
too
Is there somebody speaking in the background?
Somebody's got a microphone on someone. Okay, Karen.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for that. My question is very much at the same vein as what Willie has actually brought up. So on Sunday, I got messages from parents who said they had a 24-hour notice that Lockerbie Academy, the S2 and S3, were not able to go to school all week because there wasn't enough staff. And I absolutely 100% appreciate that we're living in this pandemic. You know, this is not going away in the near future. This is us moving forward with this for our lifetime. Do you know what I mean? We've got to find ways of actually staying on top of social distancing, cleansing and such like. But I feel that we need to be notified. Again, as Willie said, it's on Facebook. You know, that's how we're finding out. And I mean, I wasn't aware of it. And I know that, you know, I spoke to some of my colleagues within Annandale and Eskdale, and they also weren't aware of it. They found out from different various sources. And the other thing is, so I think that communication, and I do understand, honestly, I do understand how difficult it is to keep up to date. It's going forward, the mitigating are we putting in place really, because can we do virtual learning? I know that I've spoke to one of the parents. I was told that we are doing virtual learning, but their children are going on. They're actually being set 2 tasks for the day. Well, that isn't actually virtual learning as far as I'm concerned. It would be far better if we could set up some remote visual class participation. I don't know how you would do it. I'm not an IT expert, but I just think because this is going to cause us problems right through the rest of this year and next year, then I think we need to be proactively looking at how can we deliver that service for children that aren't able to actually be present in schools because of, you know, whatever reasons, the pandemic, obviously.
Okay, John, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Carruthers, and absolutely appreciate, and thanks for your comments as well, because it was so quick moving over the weekend with regards to the situation in the east at Lockerbie Academy, and it was a full day of work and trying to consider what some of those mitigations we could put in place would be, and absolutely that adaptability to move to remote learning overnight pretty much is what we try to implement to ensure that the children were least disadvantaged, because we do recognise that there is a difference between in-school learning and remote learning. But again, appreciate again the communications around about that were difficult, but clearly we need to let the parents know as soon as we possibly could once the decision was made, in order that childcare could be sought, and that's still a work in progress, if you like, in terms of looking at some of the challenges around about that. Appreciate again that there are lessons to learn. You know, a week to go as well, which probably wasn't as helpful, because when you've got a week to go, you do have to think about, well, how much can we put in place for those 5 days? But clearly, it's important to do what we can. So I think there are areas in there that we, with Education Services, along with our RRR team, will continue to work together on to ensure that we try and provide that it's not seamless, because it can never be seamless, but try and make sure we're joining it as closely as we possibly can, so that the children see as little impact, negative impact on their education as possible. So thank you.
Thanks, John. We've got Pauline and Doug. Pauline?
Hi, Chair. I think Councillor McGammon was just before me, actually.
Okay, you're right. Jackie?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Pauline. It was just around the questions that Willie and Karen have raised, and it's more about communication, I guess. A very quick example is 2 weeks ago I had numerous parents contact me. John, I think I've emailed you about this, but I'm just going to mention it on here as well. That a primary school had cancelled an event, so we've had the reasons why, etc. And it's fairly straightforward as to why we're trying to keep minimal contact. But my question is, when I emailed the school had no idea why the event had been it wasn't running, and I wasn't emailed back until I chased them 2 weeks later to say where's the response, and the answer was they didn't know the answer as to why the event had been cancelled, but it's been passed to HQ. So I just wonder what the process is there, and again, like you say, John, is it just a learning curve? Because I mean, the head teacher herself seemed pretty clueless.
John?
Okay, I suspect, and I'm not going to individualise the school, obviously, but I suspect that there are some times that communication isn't always as clear and doesn't always filter to the place it's supposed to filter to. So we can only do what we can do, and we do try and saturate that as best we possibly can. There is also the challenge of information overload, as we know, and when 40 emails arrive in your inbox at the same time, sometimes one or two can get missed. So I appreciate that one. I know we're going to meet next week to discuss that maybe a little bit further, Councillor McCammon, and just to consider that a little bit deeper in terms of that particular individual situation. But we would expect and hope that the communication flow that we have got organised within Education Services should get to the right people with the right information at the right time, in order that at a local level our head teachers are able to communicate that quite clearly to the communities which they serve in.
Okay, so Pauline followed by Doug. Pauline?
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd just like to thank yourself, John, and also Jim, for the amount of meetings that you've had with myself and some of the other team members over the last 2 weeks, because I appreciate the amount of pressure you're both under with absences and all the goings on with COVID. So thanks for that. Could I just go back to a meeting that we had, Jim, a couple of weeks ago, and it's point 3.8 on the report, page 20. And it's with regards to the fact that additional government funding of 8.145 million has been made available to support the return to schools and the continued recovery process. So what I'm really asking is, I know that you're going to bring that report to a future Education and Learning Committee, and you have agreed to that. But with regards to our conversation, Jim, you know, I and a few other councillors in particular had concerns about the mental health aspect that the children are facing at the moment, and I'm still getting an awful lot of feedback with regards to this, as I'm sure other councillors are as well. So at the moment we had discovered that there is an early intervention officer and also support teachers, but I just wondered how you'd got on, Jim, with the thoughts I'd had with possibly using the Headstrong videos. I don't wish you to come back with that today, but could you give us some idea of timings? Will that report come back before the start of next term? That would be brilliant. That's my first question. And the last question I have is with regards to, sorry, there's a bit of an echo today, sorry, on 3.3 at the end of the report on the early career teachers. I see now that we've been given the amount of probationers. So it's 46 primary registered probationers and 22 secondary registered probationers. So John, could you possibly let us know for the specific schools that had showed concern, and I'm not going to mention them by name, but I know there's a few across the region, if we can get some sort of feedback as to when those schools will get notification as to how many teachers they will get. And it's mainly the smaller rural primaries I'm referring to. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. Jim?
Hi there. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, many thanks, Councillor Drysdale. That's right, and I've passed that on to colleagues in our supporting learners group to find out whether what the impact of that particular intervention has been and what their thoughts on it are. So I'm very grateful to you for having brought that to me. And certainly I can say that that's been passed on, but I've not received any response from that as yet. But I'll certainly maybe give you a call as soon as I do have some feedback on that particular intervention. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jim.
John?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Drysdale. A couple of things. First of all, hopefully you managed to see on the chat, following Councillor McGregor's suggestion, I've popped the YouTube link onto the chat. So please feel free to go and grab it and stick it somewhere, and you can watch that at your leisure, because it is quite an interesting watch and quite insightful. So yeah, just as an update on the probationers in particular. So yeah, 46 and 22. That number's not quite 46 and 22 now. It's still a very movable feast. And literally, even though there's only 3 days to go, we're still seeing some changes in some of those numbers. There's a couple of things just to mention, that there's kind of two groups. I think it's alluded to in the paper in terms of a group 2. So there are probationers that potentially didn't get all of their experiences as students last year due to the pandemic. So they'll have some extension placement to do in some of our schools, which is complicated because they're still officially students until they complete those extension placements, and then they become a part of our training induction scheme. And then we've got the sort of others who are going straight onto the scheme. 22 registered probationers in the secondary has now reduced quite considerably since the time of writing the report. Either they haven't achieved the standard for provisional registration, or they've chosen not to join the training induction scheme, or they found a career doing something else, or whatever. And primary, I think we're still at the 46 primaries. So all schools have now been notified of their proposed staffing. Last week we had the final part of the, if you like, the last part of the jigsaw, which was the placing requests. Appeals were held on or heard on Friday morning, sorry. And so that last piece of that particular jigsaw. So really this week's the last bits and pieces, but all the schools should now know of their staffing complements now, or planned staffing complements for the start of next session.
Okay, Pauline.
Chair, do you mind if I just come back in?
Yep, yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you very much. John, that's helpful. So do the teachers tell the pupil councils, the parent councils? It's just, if I'm worried from my own point of view, if I don't know that yet, I mean, I'm not demanding that information, but I take it they communicate with the PTA. Yeah. Yeah,
they'll speak to the parent councils now and their wider parent forum. They'll send a communication out. Usually, I always tell them to leave it as late as possible in case there are any changes, because if you tell people too early and then it changes, it creates a bit of a challenge. So if you can wait as late as possible. Clearly, you want some kind of transition arrangements in terms of at least getting to know who their new teachers are going to be for the children and so on. But they should be telling the parent forum, the wider parents. Certainly, if not by now, I would expect it to be now. You know.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Okay, Doug.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's really in the back of Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Scobie in relation to the communication. I think John loosely answered it, but it was to get to the bottom of who is ultimately responsible for informing members about the school closures or whatever else is happening. Is it yourselves in education, or is it the Triple R team?
John?
Yeah, so the communication comes from the Triple R team. We obviously support that. We're part of the sort of conversation, but the Triple R team have got that communication responsibility. Councillor Fairbairn.
Thank you,
So-
John. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so perhaps if we can feed back to the RRR team about the request for members, accepting we've got, 114 schools across the region. So there's a lot of schools to cover, but we can feed this back to the RRR team. Okay, don't think I've got anyone else looking to speak. No. So if we can move to the recommendations on page 19, can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? I'm not seeing anybody not wanting to note them, so
Noted.
thank you.
Noted.
Okay, so if we move on to agenda item 5 on page 23. Education and Learning Services Revenue Budget 2021 to 2021 Outturn Report. Contained within the report details on the additional costs that have been incurred due to COVID-19 in relation to the initial emergency response and the education restart and recovery costs, which total 932,000 and 3,564,000 respectively. The emergency response costs have been funded through resources provided through the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee, and the education restart and recovery costs have been funded through the funding provided by the Scottish Government. This funding has resulted in no financial detriment being incurred by the service. The report also highlights the service has carried forward 4.581 million of funding provided from the Scottish Government to support the ongoing education recovery. It should be noted that the majority of this funding was confirmed in February 2021, with the expectation this funding would be used to support the ongoing recovery into the new financial year, and that the service has started to utilise this funding, with plans having been finalised. All savings against the education and learning budget have been delivered in full on an ongoing basis. The identified temporary shortfall has been managed by the service through compensating one-off reductions in spending within the same area where the savings are being applied. The policy development initiatives being taken forward by Education Learning Services are being progressed as planned. However, there have been some delays in initial planning, resulting in an expenditure being incurred later than anticipated. All unspent amounts are being carried forward to support the development of these initiatives in the next academic year. And we have Colin Bentlin to speak to it. Hi, Colin. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
No, Chair, nothing to add. Happy to answer any questions by members.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.
Okay, members? I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised, so I take it we'll move to the recommendations on page 23. Can we note, help me reading them out, 2.1,
Noted.
2.2,
Noted.
2.3,
Noted.
2.4,
Noted.
2.5,
Noted.
2.6.
Noted.
Okay, start our own choir. Okay, thanks, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
We move on to item 6 on page 37. Schools virtual desktop technology. This paper sets out the progress so far in the bandwidth upgrades and the live testing of the virtual desktop infrastructure in Dalbeattie Learning Campus and Northwest Community Campus. Graham McAlorum is here to take any questions on the bandwidth upgrades, and Anne Hartons is able to take any questions about the work in the schools. Graham and Anne, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Yes, if I could, Chair.
Yep,
just to update members on the current position as of Friday. There are now 39 primary sites completed, with a further 31 scheduled. To the 18 sites, there's 2 completed and 3 scheduled. And secondary sites, there are 3 completed and 2 scheduled. And out with the project, the bandwidth upgrades are as per the table in the report.
Thanks, Graham. So I'll throw it open to members. Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Aye, just a question for Graham. I know I've been in communication with Graham, but there's one school in my ward, a pilot project that should have been completed in April. This is now nearly July. I'm told I got an email from colleagues that gave me an update, but didn't give me an update on the time scale, which is the important thing in my view. The school or the schools in my ward don't have a time scale yet from colleagues or from BT. Should be done in July, and I think all members in every school in the region should be able to find some means of identifying when what's being carried out in their school. It's a challenge, I understand that, but it's something we need to address. BT have already let one of the schools down. They failed to turn up to complete works. I understand from the messages I get that there's road works and all sorts of things, which mean they need a road opening permit, so that has to be information within the council. And I think it'd be helpful if members could get a timescale for all the schools in their wards, just to give them confidence and the teachers confident that it'll be done in time to allow the work to be done before schools go back in August. Just as an aside, one of the schools in my ward, the parent council, have written to the chief executive of BT complaining bitterly that there's been no work carried out in the school to bring the broadband to the school. It's affecting the welfare and education of children, and it's not acceptable. I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I understand it. And I think we need to be pressing BT to make sure they turn up and do the work they're supposed to do to allow us to complete the installation of the schemes right out through the whole of the region, Chair. And I'd be grateful if we get an indication from staff for each individual school and when the work's being done, rather than just an indicative end of July, which is really only 5 weeks away anyway.
Okay. Anne, is that one for you?
Hi, Graham. Do you want to answer that? It's regarding bandwidth.
Okay. We certainly have a schedule up until the end of July with the individual schools on it. I'm sure we can make that available through Susan Martin and her team for members, if that's what they wish.
Happy with that, Jim?
Yeah, I'm happy, Chair, because BT have already let us down. They're 2 months past when they should have been at one of my schools, and there's no specific date that I have been given when that work will be carried out, and it's causing concern locally. And I think we need to address that and provide as much information as soon as we can to the schools and the wider community. And I'd be grateful if Graham could make sure that I get the stuff in my ward. I'm sure other members of the committee and the council will all want the same kind of information, just to keep them up to speed with what's happening within their respective schools. Yes, I'm happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Jim.
Sorry, is that Sanker Primary School that you're talking about?
No, it's Galloway. Galloway had a date for our IT department and Capita to go to the school to carry out some works, and it was cancelled at 2 hours' notice because BT had failed to provide the connection for us to do the remainder of the work. And speaking to the secretary of the parent council just a couple of days ago, the head teachers never do a notification when that's likely to happen. They're concerned that the pupils are being let down. It's one of the biggest SIMD areas in the whole of Scotland. Kids are needing this extra provision to help them to get through this educational situation to find themselves in, and they're really unhappy. So it's Galloway, but Sanker's in a similar situation, and I'm sure they're no unique. I didn't want to get down to local levels because I just thought some of the all members would want to know. But it was Galloway, Graham. That was the
Okay, I know Sanker's scheduled for the 25th of this month. I don't think I have a date for Galloway as such, but I can certainly look into that one for you.
Brilliant. If you can pursue it vigorously, I'd be very grateful, Graham. Thank you. And thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be information which will be useful to all members. So possibly if we went out to all 43 elected members, possibly in a
I would
table
agree with
form.
that, Chair, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I've got John Young followed by Willie Scobie. John?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, when the virtual desktop's completely rolled out, I would presume that all staff and students will be able to access their own accounts, their own software from any school and also in their own homes. So if a primary school pupil went to a secondary school to wait on a big brother or sister, they would still be able to access their own software. I would presume. I would like clarification of that. But what I'm really asking is, will these staff and students be able to access their accounts if they're in other council properties, such as their public libraries? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Young, everything that you have outlined will be possible with virtual desktop. All you need is a good internet connection, and it will take you straight to the cloud, and you can access any software, your own OneDrive through Glow, anything that they would want. Just a good internet connection is all that's required.
Okay, John?
I appreciate that. My goodness, how times have changed. Thank you, Chair.
Just takes a pandemic. Okay, Willie?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And just as Jimmy was saying there, I don't want to, minimalise to ward by ward, but there is a particular issue in Stranraer. I know that it's been said that we're going to get broadband rolled out, and I think it was through Graham's good office that was given the contact for BT Open Reach, and that had to do with the East End of Stranraer, and it just happens that's where Stranraer Academy is located. So not only are the people not getting the broadband signal or the megabytes that's required, not that I know anything about that, but the school was affected at the beginning, I think, of last year, and during the pandemic, then a number of students couldn't access some of the material work that they required to go through. And it really is of vital importance that kids in schools have access and can gain access to these coursework, but also it's the whole issue of broadband and how people can get it without any interruptions. Always seeing that wee round circle turning in the front of their screens, which seems to be a huge problem. Still in Stranraer, and as Jim is saying, it's throughout the whole of the region that this was supposed to be a priority issue in terms of rolling out broadband, and it doesn't feel like it. So maybe we could get some update on just where we're at, and that whatever is there is capable of providing what schools in particular require.
Up to you, Graham or Anne.
I could point out that Councillor Scobie, that Stranraer Academy has had their bandwidth upgrade, and I know that, and we've tested it, and the connection is very good. So all students within and staff within Stranraer Academy have now got a very good experience, and we're working our way through the primary schools with the bandwidth upgrades. So by the time this programme of work is finished, there will be no whirling on screens. Everybody should be able to access what they need to in the cloud.
I think, Anne, it's more to do with home tuition and accessing their coursework. So I appreciate what you're saying about Stranraer Academy being upgraded, but it's to people being at home, still having to do home tuition and so forth. Where are we with that?
Graham, I think Councillor Scobie is alluding to the rural gigabit programme, perhaps, where our local communities are going to benefit from bandwidth upgrades. Do you perhaps want to add something to that?
No, I think what you're saying is right there, Anne. It is the R100 programme that's going to address some of these kind of final issues, as it were. Although I am aware that throughout the whole of the region, there is a high demand on the capacity that we have in all our broadband circuits. I say we are engaging with BT and BT OpenReach to encourage them, shall we say, to update that capacity. But at the moment, the Scottish Government standards are being met by BT Openreach. And I think there is a lot of further work to be done now.
Chair, I would hope that in your recommendations that we as a committee would address this to put further pressure not only on BT Openreach but also the Scottish Government, because there are huge problems throughout the region, and if the pandemic continues then we're going to have kids who are seriously affected with their home tuition. Hopefully we don't need that the pandemic will move into zero and then we're totally on top of it. But I would hazard a guess that may not be the case. So I would hope we would pick that up in the recommendations.
Well, I think Graham said that we are actually pressuring or putting pressure on BT to prioritise this as a council.
Yeah, but he did say that they are meeting the Scottish Government standards. Well, if that's a Scottish Government standard, then we are seriously affected in Dumfries and Galloway across the board in the demands that's being made of the circuit. And I think we need to be putting a letter away to the Scottish Government. If they think that's acceptable, then we wouldn't accept it. At least people that I represent don't see it as acceptable.
Yeah, okay, we'll look at that when we come to the recommendations. Okay. Don't think we've got anybody else to looking to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? On page 37, can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and agree that we write to the Elaine?
I'm just going to suggest that with issue that the standards of the Scottish Government not really purely a matter for the Education Committee. I was just wondering whether Councillor Scobie would want to bring that up at full council on Thursday, because it's really a pan council issue rather than just an education issue. We've got
Elaine.
A COVID report coming up then, and we could maybe raise it then.
Yeah, it's not just education, it's across the board to businesses and everyone. So quite happy with that, Elaine.
Yeah, we'll pick it up on Thursday in that case. And thanks.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, so going back to the recommendations, can we note 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3?
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Graham and Anne. So moving on to item 7 on page 41, Dumfries Learning Town, phase 2. This report provides members with an update on progress made since the last committee meeting of 18th of March 2021. The required positions to support the programme are progressing through the appropriate employment stages and will be filled as soon as practically possible. The overarching project level outcomes are being refreshed and will be brought to this committee at a future date. Members are also presented with the roles and responsibilities of the project board for consideration. And we have a moment. Lauren Foss to speak to this one. Lauren, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, by way of a quick update since the paper was written, the client side roles are progressing well. We have some appointments and the rest should theoretically be in place before the end of the summer break. The senior responsible officer and the senior project manager roles will take slightly longer because there's a longer notice period on those positions. However, they're all moving along swiftly. The contract strategy documentation is being discussed later on this week. So in coming weeks, we should have that finalised and a decision back to members to allow us to move the programme at Dumfries High School forward. And finally, with members' agreement today, hopefully we'll be in a position where we can formally write to the key position holders that take a role within the project board moving forward. But happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Members, any questions? No, I'm not seeing anything. So can we move to the recommendations on page 41? Can we 2.1 note the progress of Dumfries Learning Town phase 2?
Noted.
And 2.2, agree the project board roles and responsibilities as detailed in section 3.5 in the appendix.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Okay, so moving on to item 8 on page 47. Properties / building schools asset class update. This report provides members with information on the outturn position for financial year 2020-2021 for capital expenditure within the school's asset class. The paper also seeks members' approval for the 3-year capital investment plan. In addition, information around 2 projects is brought to members' attention which required expediting to ensure the summer break could be utilised for delivery. And we have you again, Lauren. Okay, we have
Thank you,
Lauren to speak to the paper. Anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly again, I'll draw members' attention to Appendix 4. The rest of the paper is almost business as usual and something that members may have seen in previous reincarnations. But Appendix 4 is a deviation where, as a council, we're in a position that a significant number of capital projects across all asset classes have seen slippage, financial slippage. So this year, this financial year, there's an allocation of funding that hasn't been aligned to anything and hasn't been able to be spent fully. So there is a request going across the asset classes to look at what additional priority projects could be brought forward or where this money could be better utilised rather than just simply carrying forward to future years. And Appendix 4 details that for the school's asset class. There's a key project to conclude the 1140 delivery programme where we have to look at a refurbishment or a replacement for Noble Hill early years building. Now that project itself is a combination of asset class funding and 1140 hours funding, and to be able to better meet the needs of that project, it would be worth considering retaining £1 million of the slippage within the school's asset class into financial year 22-23, and that's one of the proposals in there that members may wish to consider presenting to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. In addition to that, looking at where we could expend capital funding quickly this year, we've spoken to colleagues in other services that deliver services on behalf of education and learning. And from the facilities management perspective, the catering and cleaning side of things, we've been working with Carol Burrells and Alan Mawson around where there could be some quick wins in terms of accounting for some of the unallocated capital and something that can be delivered this financial year. So Appendix 4 hopefully captures what level of investment is required across that area and the types of things that it would be spent on. And that's something that if members have any further questions on, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm sure members would be quite happy to support that will benefit the delivery of education. Okay, so I've got Jim Dempster, Stephen and Pauline. So Jim.
Thanks, Chair. No, I'm sure that's not what Lauren was saying, but if you look at the Appendix 1, there's a huge amount of slippage. In fact, one in my ward's £750,000, and I wouldn't like to see that being wired to somewhere else and us finishing up with a half-finished project in some of the schools that are listed here in Appendix 1. I hope that's not what Lauren's suggesting, because I would want to see these projects completed, the whole list of them, because you can't have a half-finished project anywhere in schools and then simply walk away. So just a peace of mind, please, Lauren, that that's not what you're suggesting, that you're wiring the slippage from projects where presumably COVID-19 has caused the slippage, and that the intention will be to complete these projects in these wards, and the funds you're talking about would be out with that particular grouping, because there's one at £250,000, one at 300k, and one in my ward at £750,000, and it would be quite unacceptable, in my view, to cease that kind of work and transfer the funds elsewhere.
Lauren, can you reassure Councillor Dempster?
Absolutely, happy to do that. I think the really challenging part in this is the COVID impact and the delay that brought about because of the financial ability to get far along through a project is where this issue's arisen. So fully committed to all of the projects that sit within here, and the full allocation against them will still remain. However, if we take this financial year, we're £1.6 million behind on spend. So if we have that additional money brought into this financial year, we don't physically have the resource to put that amount through the books. The projects will still continue on, but the delay or the impact is actually felt on projects that haven't yet been brought into the asset class for investment. So we will see an impact, but they're not with schools that are committed to at this point in time. So the pressure is, we have the money this financial year, rather than leaving it in the bank to do nothing, what can we use it for at this point in time to get a better value for that money that's sitting? So that's the premise of looking at the overall capital that's available this financial year. Is there something we can do with that across all council services to get value for that money rather than just collecting interest on it? Now, if that stays within the school's asset class, that then stays within investment for education. If PT committee take a decision to, for example, put it towards electric vehicles or renewables or something else, then again that's good value from the council's perspective because the funding's being used. If that is the case, it does impact on school projects, but school projects that aren't yet aligned for investment, and it moves into year 3, 4 projects further down the line. Hopefully that provides a level of reassurance.
Okay, Jim. Take that as yes.
Yeah, happy with that, Chair. As long as we don't rumble on and on and on, because there is another impact which is unseen at committee level, and that's the building site within schools and pupils having to work along with an industrial site, and you don't want that to be going on to year on year on year. We want that finished as soon as we can and get the schools back to what they do best. I'm delighted the investment's there, by the way. I'm just keen to see it completed rather than trundle on and on. But thanks very much, Chair. Happy with that, and thanks, Laran.
Okay, Jim. Okay, so I've got Stephen, Pauline, Elaine and Willie. So Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Laran, I think just listening to what you've heard there, I'm now slightly more confused about how to join up. We had a recommendation at Economy and Resources to recommend for the property asset class to include a request for £1 million, which would allow priority projects needing planned preventative maintenance, which were obviously to be finalised, to basically go into a 1-year pot of, I think it was revenue funding, but it was under a capital paper for some reason, but to bid into that based on a priority. So, but what you seem to be saying is there's an additional 1 million not yet aligned, if you like, to be sort of kept by. So I'm just sort of wondering, that to me doesn't, I'm just sort of wondering how that tallies. So that request there from the Economy and Resources Committee, which is specifically to include education asset classes along with non-education asset classes, I'm just sort of wondering how to square those. So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Larry?
Happy to, Chair. Yeah. So the planned preventative maintenance budget request for £1 million actually is it supports the repairs and maintenance and revenue side of the council delivery service, and that's managed through so that's not something that sits within education specifically. That side of it is something that would be used for looking at replacing guttering, painting external window areas to stop them rotting away and getting worse over time. The £1 million inside the school's asset class is specifically for Noble Hill.
Sorry, Lan, can I just sorry to interrupt you. Just Chair, I'm just wondering. I don't want to lay claim to some of the bodily noises that seem to be happening, but can somebody maybe turn off their other mic just to avoid future YouTube clicks or whatever? Thank you.
Carry on, Lauren.
No, thank you. It's like Blue Peter, isn't it? You know, never work with children and animals. We've got so the PPM part is a separate element altogether from the £1 million for Noble Hill. The overall pot that sets of capital unallocated is £5.2 5.5 million pounds in total. So the million for PPM is a separate request from the 1.7 for education and learning. And I would expect to see other requests coming through other asset classes into the overall available pot. And then finance, procurement, transformation will take an overall decision around where they're allocated to. So that hopefully explains how they tie together. And they are separate bids into the single pot. And hopefully the total request from all the asset classes will be less than the 5.5, and that'll give an ability for every asset class to get a provision from there.
Okay, Stephen.
Just very quickly, so just to double check. So I think at the E&R committee, the where it was left, I think there's still a microphone on, Chair. Sorry.
Jim, you've switch it off.
Okay, thank you. So it was just I think it was waiting on the results of condition surveys, I think, to sort of set out, you know, what the most need was, basically. So will we see the educational element of that come to this committee, so that we know how much of that sort of £1 million PPM budget we'll need to sort of dip into for the education asset class preventive maintenance?
That wouldn't come to this service committee. That would be reported through Paul McCulloch and the repairs side. So that would go through the non-schools route. And again, that prioritised investment for repairs and maintenance would sit as it's managed just now. So there's a central repairs help desk that covers all council assets, whether they're buildings, whether it's schools, non-schools, and they base the investment on a priority order of statutory compliance, keeping a building open. It doesn't distinguish between whether it's a school or a non-school, and when that money dries up, it's gone. So this £1 million helps get that process ahead of the game. So that's not something we as a service have any input into, although we are aligned to our colleagues where we're looking at significant capital investment. It would be foolish to put in some planned preventative maintenance if, you know, there's no point in painting the windows if we're going to come along and replace them the following year. So there is an alignment of that.
Okay, I think thanks.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Pauline.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a relief, Councillor Thompson, that you're not multitasking. I'm relieved it wasn't yourself. Thanks, Lauren, for the report. I am still a bit confused about the Property Schools Capital Programme. So, Lauren, I just wondered if you could just have a chat with me offline after the meeting sometime in the next few days, just with regards to Kirkcudbright Academy, because I know it's a specific school and I don't want to do that in this meeting with regards to the two figures that were in that report, which I was very relieved to see, but I'm just concerned that they might now not be spent. So could we just speak about that maybe in a few days or next week? No urgent rush. That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Pauline. Elaine.
Yeah, people are being quite parochial, so am I going to be quite parochial as well, and welcome the suggestion that there's an investment in Noble Hill Primary School, because not only are there pressures on the budget, there's also been pressures within that school for many years, and the expansion of the Summer Park estate, which to go to Noble Hill School only is making that worse. So, you know, at one time Noble Hill was going to be incorporated in the new high school, but because we've had to change the proposals for DLT to Noble Hill Primary School, will have to be repurposed and rebuilt rather than actually being transferred onto a different site. So I do welcome that. The only thing I'm not quite sure in the report at 3.4.1 is it says, however, in financial year 2022-23, there is significant pressure on funding due to planned investment. And then it says members are being asked to support a request be made to FPT committee to remain 1 million and allocate it to financial year 2022-23. So that's the same financial year. So is it actually the pressure on 23-24?
So if we're not successful in having £1 million added or retained, depending how the terminology goes, from the unspent funding this year into financial year 22-23, we're effectively £1 million
right, okay.
short
yes, we're £1 million short.
for that
yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not actually that there's pressure on the budget because of the requirements of Noble Hill. It's actually just that if we don't spend the unspent money, then there will be pressures next year.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But anyway, I do hope that people can support that, because it has been a problem in that part of Dumfries for some time. Thanks.
Okay, Willie?
Yeah, metaphorically, if it's good for the goose, then it's good for the gander. I'm looking at Appendix 1, Lauren, and primary schools 1140 capital programme out on 2021. And I see two there from the ward, Park Primary, Stranraer refurbishment, and likewise for Cacum, Lokercum is in the 2021 for I presume refurbishment as well. I'm more concerned with the park and taking into consideration the 1140, and I know there's appeal into the Care Commission on one of the schools, but parents not getting first choice may have to revert to second and third choice. And will Park be able to cope rather than it being, as it says, slippage, Axel to 21-22? Will this work be up to speed, Lan, and capable of taking the kids who may not get their first choice?
Lauren?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're delivering 1140 now as we speak across the authority. Park, as you know, was one of the earlier phases and has been delivering in a contingency model using the spaces as they are just now. However, what they don't have is the, I suppose, the bespoke fit out that they should have for the long term. So what we're waiting for is that opportunity for the school to go away, enjoy their holidays. When they come back, we'll have been inside the spaces, fitted them out as we would expect a nursery specification to have. So things like the dining space adjoining the two rooms, opening up of some of the walls to create that free flow between the rooms. So physically there is enough space for the nursery to meet the demands of the capacity that's been defined for them, and we won't increase that. It'll stay as it is, but it'll allow the space to look and feel more like a nursery rather than the primary school feel that it's got just now. So there's no impact in capacity. There's no pressure in terms of having a diminished service there just now, and we can meet the demands for that area. As I say, it's just that ability to get in and make it more like a nursery than it currently is.
So just clarify that'll be done over the summer period then, Lauren, is that correct?
It certainly starts in the summer period. There may be a point where it has to go beyond that. What we're experiencing just now is very challenging in terms of timescales. Silly things like, you know, a contractor goes along to a material suppliers and they can't get plywood. They ask for 20 bags of cement, they get 5 and told to come back the next day. So whilst we have a programme that in normal times would have been deliverable across the summer, I can't give that guarantee that it will be achievable. However, what we will do is guarantee that the space will be able to work and operate when the children come back in the summer, should the work still not be completely finished. And then we'll put every resource that we can in place to make sure that it is. It really comes down to materials in this day and age, unfortunately.
I'm sure all efforts will be made to try and overcome that. So thanks for that, Lauren.
Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak, so can we move to the recommendations on page 47? Can we note 2.1? Can we agree 2.2, the 3-year allocation of funding across the schools asset class? Note 2.3, agree 2.4 for the retention of the capital slippage. Agree 2.5, the £714 to £1,000 to support facilities management within schools. Note 2.6, note 2.7, and agree 2.8 to appoint a specialist sports contractor. Everybody happy with that?
Agreed
Okay.
and noted, Jeff.
Thanks, Roz. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, so if we move on to item 9 on page 67. This is the Supporting Learners Delivering Transformation Update. At the February 2021 committee, members were advised that the National Review of Additional Support for Learning and the subsequent action plan jointly produced by the Scottish Government and COSLA. In March, members were updated with the action plan detailing the activities to be carried out locally to drive forward the change in how we deliver support to all our learners to allow them to reach their full potential. This report seeks to update members on the progress within the delivery of the delivery of the Supporting Learners Transformational Programme, and we have Hugh Smith and Jim Brown to speak to it. Hugh and Jim, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll throw it open to members. Members? Not seeing anything.
Question's got his hand up, Jay.
Sorry, Robert McQuiston.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Robert?
Thanks, Chair. Just a wee point on paragraph 3.5, referring to development of governance arrangements. I'm just wondering, would such arrangements include an awareness of support staff outside ASFL? In other words, a kind of much more holistic and integrated overview of support, because that is a complex area, to be honest.
I'm seeing Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, absolutely. I think that a key part for this transformation is how we work together with our colleagues across the council, but also in health as well, and third sector. I think the expectations placed upon us from the Morgan review of additional support absolutely sets that out, that this isn't an education alone, that we need to forge new partnerships, and the key partnership, of course, is always going to be with our families, but this is an absolute the governance arrangement to make sure that we have the opportunity to bring all of those partners in around the table and to co-produce the solutions. That's I suppose, is the key task for us, and that's the purpose of the engagement process, is to look at how we can restart, in a sense, what that model looks like for children, putting them at the centre and then building the resources within education, but out with as well as a team to be able to affect the best outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, just very briefly, and within schools as well, within the institution, there is a complexity of supports. You know, you can start from buddying in S6 or P7 or whatever. It is quite an array of supports available, and it's just keeping how shall I put it, a tight rein on that support, ensuring that it doesn't sort of disperse into the atmosphere. You understand what I'm saying? Thanks anyway for your answers, you.
Thanks, Robert. So I got Willie and Stephen. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, my question's around whether we're going to have enough money, enough financial resources to tackle this problem, this issue. And I will remember not so many years ago, only 2 or 3 years ago, we took £700,000 out of additional support for learners, and we haven't replaced that £700,000. I think we did in part to some 340 last year, I believe. But it's really to ask Hugh, and I'm looking at 3.3 here, with the number of young people who are their mental health is affected by COVID, and the seriousness of that, and whether we have enough resources. And it goes on to say staffing is critically important, and we as members only a few weeks ago received a communication from Unison that are seriously concerned about their members and their mental health. I just, I fear that we're not putting enough financial resources into the task that is before us in terms of dealing with these young people and staff, in terms of their mental health and the effect COVID has had on them for that year-long, longer lockdown.
You?
Thank you, Councillor Scobie, and I suppose I would want to just express my thanks on behalf of the service to members that have protected the budget, I think, very well over the last few years, and I think we're in a reasonably good place. We continue to look at all options in terms of the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people in schools, and we have a group that's working on that again in partnership with colleagues in health in youth services and other partners. I suppose that the point would be that supporting learners and additional support in and of itself is not going to be the panacea for all ills, and that's where we've got the opportunity through some of the other funding streams that have come in recently into the authority in terms of additional PEF funding, in terms of COVID recovery funding, and it's really about making sure that we utilise all of that funding as best as possible to make the biggest impact. Absolutely share your concerns about not just our children and young people, but also our staff as well. To get it right for everybody needs to be in the right place, and that's the challenge. But it's a challenge that we're all meeting, and we've been meeting for the last year and a half, and will continue to do so. So I take your point about resources, but I do think there are other funding streams that are coming in to the authority, and you know, schools are accessing those and working with us and developing some of their own local responses that will augment and add on to the core delivery, which is from the supporting learner service.
Can I come back to you?
Briefly.
Yeah, just to appreciate what Hugh has said, that there'll be other funding sources. Could this, and maybe address it to yourself, Chair, that we get a continual report, an update on what the effects of those other funding sources are, and the effect that is having on the particular issue. If this becomes a standing issue at each of the committee for a report on the monitoring that's being done and how effective it's being on our young people and staff. I'm sure you'll cover that in the recommendations, Chair, but this becomes a standing report on the monitor of that.
Don't know if we need to have a report every 2 months. We'd probably have one every 6 months.
Any young child that's suffering that problem, Chair, they may disagree with you, and I would disagree with you, that we need to know that it's, you know, it's there and young people are being responded to, and that we are tackling the problem. So 2 months is too long for me, but that's the committee cycle, so I think it is important we do have it each 2 months.
We wouldn't be identifying individual children anyway. You would like to come in?
I suppose, Chair, I was just thinking that you know, our performance reporting in effect would be capturing, you know, in terms of what are our indicators of children that are that are struggling. Often it's attendance, it can sometimes be behaviour, it can be that behaviour relating to exclusion. I'm not suggesting they're the only indicators, because it's also about, we speak to children, we know our children and young people well. You know, it's the opportunities that some of those other services that we talked about earlier, about youth services as well, engaging with young people. I guess there's a number of different ways that I think that we already report on that information to elected members. And I suppose it's just that the risk is that we're overly kind of repeating that information. I think that there are some reasonably good measures. I think one of the issues we're looking in terms of mental health and well-being, you know, is what are our indicators of success? And I'm sure that's just what the Scottish Government are looking as well in terms of a long-term objective. We're not this, you know, there's no quick short-term fixes for some of the impacts that young people have had. But I suppose I'm just thinking that doubly reporting probably would become quite an onerous task, and maybe not as helpful, given that we've already got a performance framework in place.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You don't want to overload the system by continually feeding back information, which probably doesn't move the assessment forward to any great extent. And
you would suggest, Chair, the regularity of reporting then?
How often do we report at the moment, Hugh, in terms of KPIs, etc.?
I'm going to defer to Jim, who's hopefully getting a message.
Yeah, Chair, you mentioned 6 months. Sorry, I'm just going to. Oh. Thank you. You mentioned 6 months. I think that's not an unreasonable time frame. I think we need to give sufficient time for interventions that are identified and implemented locally to have that time to impact. I absolutely take the point that Councillor Scobie makes, that if there is a need, we need to address the need as a matter of urgency. I'm just very keen to understand how a reporting framework would address that particular need, and I'm absolutely agreeing with that point about the local intelligence at a school level to identify need and to respond quickly and flexibly. And I think what we do have is we have got connections to every school so that we can find out or we can support our head teachers to understand what best interventions might be used in given situations. So I'm not sure how a more frequent than 6 month, more frequent reporting arrangement would actually help that process. Whilst I absolutely agree, Councillor Scobie, with your basic position that 2 months is too long for a youngster who has got an urgent need. 2 months is too long to wait for that need to be met. Thank you.
Which you wouldn't do anyway. So you suggest a 6 monthly updated report? Yep. Okay.
I think I'm going to have to accept it, Chair. I don't hear anyone or see anyone coming in the chat to support, you know, a more frequent reporting system.
Okay, accepted them. Right, so can we move to the recommendations on page 67? Can we note 2.1?
Chair, apologies.
Councillor Thompson from the list.
Sorry, I didn't pick you up. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks. Just on this model, I mean, I would be interested to see how we as an authority marry up the things like, you know, if there's coordinated support plans managed by education officers with a responsibility for additional support, how that sort of tallies with the maybe sort of more local responsive nature of schools recruiting directly, whether that's through PEF or otherwise, to provide support to pupils, and also how that ties in with what we know about pupils transitioning from primary school to secondary school, where a need is sort of being flagged up, and who, you know, does that sort of get passported from the primary school to the secondary school? So and also about the map of sort of allocation of need, you know, so clearly the resource should follow the child, and if it's known where the children are going to be, if they move from another school to another secondary, for example, how do we manage that? Because obviously there is I would suggest a relationship between what the Education Authority does and what individual schools decide to do or not, given that they maybe have separate budgets to do that with. And then there's the follow-on from that, which is if a need has been addressed through PEF, for example, then the need has moved away elsewhere, which is, you know, if the child moves, for example, what happens to the resource that's been employed? Because ultimately we have to foot the bill for that. So it's really just is that the sort of thing that we will see in future reports, so it's set out more clearly and more understandably?
You?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and I think we could set that out more clearly, and if that would be helpful. Effectively we have a core allocation that comes from the centre, and then we have processes in place that regular kind of additionality where there are individual circumstances that change. In terms of our core allocation, that is currently an annual allocation. We've talked in previous years about moving to more of a 3-year allocation. To try and create some stability for schools and for staff. We felt that this year wasn't the right year, given that the response, the lockdown, and just the challenges, and really we wanted to just kind of work through for one more year before we move to that model. So in terms of we work closely with our schools, and you know, and we have been asking schools to consider other funding streams in terms of the broader supports that would need to be available for children in terms of returning to school, and we'll continue to do that. In terms of staff that are recruited, we have a core staff which effectively have permanent rights within the council. Our responsibility is always to make sure that they have a secure position. That sometimes means that we have to move staff around as the needs within different schools change, and therefore that we would ask folk to. And we have a proper policy agreed with the unions in terms of how folks would transfer. For the last few years with pupil equity funding, schools have been able to and have been recruiting, in some cases learning assistants, in other cases more enhanced roles, and we work together as best as we can. And in previous years when the need for that member of staff is no longer there in the school, we've been able to accommodate, if they've accrued any permanence rights, we've been able to accommodate them in our core allocation. We are getting pretty much tight in terms of that we have pretty much a full complement of core staff. So we need to work much more closely, continue to work closely with our schools in terms of making sure that we don't have overstaffing anywhere at any point. To be honest, though, if schools heard me talking about overstaffing, they probably want to kick me around the room. But so we are working closely. We do have the situation where we do move staff, though in reality, it's very rare that staff move to follow children during the school year. It's more likely that they will move at the end of the year, because again, you know, that we've moved away as best as we can from the concept of one-to-one support. We know from the research that actually children don't do as well with one-to-one support. Not all children, but the majority of children don't do well with that intensity of support, and actually that sometimes it can become a barrier to learning. So as we have done that, what that means is that a full-time member of staff may be working with a larger cohort of children, and actually it's not as easy to move the 2 or 4 or 10 hours of their contract to say those hours are now sitting in another school. So effectively, most of that staff movements happens at the end of the year when we kind of reset with our allocation process. I don't know if that's probably too detailed, and maybe that it would be helpful just to produce something that would be a little bit, that would simplify that process.
Perhaps if you do
that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and send it out to all members. Yeah. Okay.
We'll do that.
Right. Okay, so just checking. I don't seem to have anybody else wanting to speak. So can we move to the recommendations on page 67? Can we note 2.1 and agree 2.2 to receive a further report at the October Education and Learning Committee, setting out a 3-year project programme, and additional recommendation 2.3 to receive 6 monthly, I don't know, you'd call them monitoring reports. Yeah. Okay, are members happy with that? Okay. Right, thanks, Jim and Hugh. So we move on to item 10 on page 73. Early Learning and Childcare Update. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on national and local developments on early learning and childcare, including the current uptake of 1,140 hours, the progress in the allocation of places from August 2021, the impact of COVID-19 on provision, and the introduction of the Scottish Milk and Healthy Snack Scheme from August. The report also asks members to agree to a contract extension of 1 year for providers on the early learning and childcare and brokerage services flexible framework, and to commence planning for the new framework, and to agree to the advertisement of 2-year-old entitlement to funded placements, including the extension of the eligibility criteria for children with a care experienced parent. And we have Rosie Smith to speak to this. Hi, Rosie. Is there anything you want to add to it?
No, thank you, Chair. There's no updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Members? Willie?
Yeah, could I just thank Rosie and John for all the assistance and cooperation they gave for Belmont School that's recognised in 3.9, but also recognise and didn't appreciate that there's a further 2 schools, Hodham and Lochmaben Nursery. So that's good that we are going back to the Care Inspectorate to ask them to keep open their consideration. It's once that consideration is given, and whatever that may be, we don't know, but I hope it would be soon, or sooner rather than later, to allow those schools to arrange whatever they need to arrange, if it's positive, for the parents who put down as their first choice to any of those 3 schools. And over and above that is just a question of the committee chair, really, is should it come back and they wish, any of the schools wish to appeal, it's that appeal to the sheriff, as I understand it. Would that be a decision for the committee or the directorate? That would much be it was committee. Or there may no need to be a decision. It would automatically go to the sheriff if schools wish to appeal.
Rosie?
Oh, that's it. Sorry, I was just on mute there. So with regards to the appeal process, what happens is once Care Inspectorate inform us of the likely decision, we have an option to either withdraw the variation or let the variation go forwards. If the Care Inspectorate decide not to approve the variation, i.e. the increase in numbers, then they will propose to refuse the variation, at which point we have 14 days to provide a written response to that. They will then relook at it, and then following that, they will either approve the variation or have a final refusal of the variation. At that point, we then have an option to take that to a sheriff for further investigation into that, whether they are going to approve or not approve. So that's the process for that.
Okay, John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't
Thanks,
actually
Chair.
have an
Sorry, Chair, which John?
I don't have an awful lot to add to what Rosie's actually just said, but clearly, you know, we would obviously need to seek legal advice about whether it would be appropriate for the local authority to put in an appeal to the sheriff. I do understand the situation in the particular nursery that's been described this afternoon, and I do understand that the Parent Council are considering the information that's been sent from the local authority about their understanding of that and also what their next steps might be. So until we have that information, I don't think we can really comment too much further at this time and at this committee, but certainly happy to take that one offline and have further conversations around about what that might look like with that particular nursery situation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John.
Happy to do that, Chair, and it's really just the process. Rosie gave a process there. It's the timing to that, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later that we would know outcomes of the various applications. Happy to take it offline, but I think as a committee we do need to have the total clarity as to what John is talking about in the broad sense, because I wasn't talking about one. I see there are 3 schools there who may face the same situation. I don't know what the others are.
Well, as John says, we need to take legal advice as well as to how we proceed, because presumably we need to have grounds for an appeal. Okay, so John Young.
Hey, thanks, Chair. I just wondered in recommendation 2.6, the introduction of the Scottish milk and healthy snacks, and that's expanded on page 78. Will these be purchased locally? Will we be using Dumfries and Galloway milk and have I know there's biscuit providers in Castle Douglas. Are we sourcing these items locally in Dumfries and Galloway?
Rosie?
Yes, our school nurseries, we use the framework for a local provider for milk. And in terms of the fruit and vegetables, what we do is at the moment for snack, the local nurseries and the private funded providers will purchase that locally themselves. But that certainly is something that we would be keen to support locally.
Okay, thanks, Rosie.
That's excellent news. Thank you.
Okay, John. Just checking. I don't see anybody else wanting to speak. So can we move to the recommendations on page 73? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, agree 2.4 to the contract extension, agree 2.5 to the advertisement of 2-year-old entitlement to funded placements, and note 2.6.
Agreed and noted.
Thanks, Ros. Thanks, Rosie. So moving on to item 11 on page 139. This is the Wallace Hall Academy admission arrangements and the statutory consultation update. On 12th November 2019, Education and Learning Committee agreed to progress the statutory consultation on the change of catchment boundary for Wallace Hall Academy. In February 2020, officers commenced the 6-week statutory consultation period. However, the COVID-19 pandemic led to schools closing from the 23rd of March 2020, and it was determined that the consultation process would be paused. The following report seeks members' approval for revised consultation timeline for the proposal, and we have John Finn to speak to it. John, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Purely and simply to remind members that this paper has been provided before, and obviously the consultation timeline has been appended at the paper. I have to be honest, and probably following the earlier discussions we've had at committee this afternoon, I am nervous about timelines in terms of the ability to meet face to face and have those the statutory requirement of the consultation aspect in terms of face to face meetings. However, with a fair wind, I think is probably the best way to say that we would expect to start that consultation when schools return after the summer break.
Thanks, John. Members? Nope, no takers. So if we move to the
Switch my mic off. Somebody switch my mic off from the computer again. Could I just ask a question? I get what I hear about the Hollywood Primary School is that most of the youngsters from there go to Wallace Hall, unless it's changed a lot since the North West Community Campus opened. But a lot, as I say, a lot of the children went for Hollywood went to Wallace Hall, and I notice you're saying Burnhead was linked with Hollywood. Just wonder what your view is on that.
I noticed that the chair seems to have frozen. Jeff, are you still there? Can you?
It's just the what I speak to is now, John.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy obviously to respond to that. So clearly that's the purpose of the consultation in terms of trying to ensure that people have that view brought forward. Yeah, I think in terms of footfall, a lot of the young people when they leave Primary 7 at Hollywood do tend to go to Wallace Hall Academy rather than North West Community Campus. Obviously, we would hope and expect that they would be able to go to North West Community Campus, and there's certainly that option there. But that'll be picked up as part of that consultation exercise, and people will have their views heard at that point. So thank you.
Thanks, John.
Ros, could I ask you just to assume the role of chair while we wait for Jeff to come back into the meeting?
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
So on item 11, do we have any more comments or questions? So could we move to the recommendations, please, which is 2.1 to recommence the statutory consultation and 2.2 to receive a further report in early 2022.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, moving on now to item 12, and this is rural school provision for Carsfen Primary School. I'm afraid I don't have the chair's notes. That's actually a point. Perhaps the vice chair should be furnished with those. But the report provides members with an updated position on Carsfen Primary School, which operated as part of a partnership with Kells Primary School and Dalrice Primary School until August 2019, when it became mothballed due to there being no pupils attending the school. This report also requests members to agree the revised statutory closure consultation timeline to be undertaken in relation to Carsfen Primary School and nursery class. John, do you want to say any more about this paper, please?
Again, I think members will remember this paper being presented to committee on the 13th of May, and it was agreed at that committee that there would be a further period of downtime, I suppose, just to allow some community conversations to take place. And so this paper is in essence just asking that the timeline be moved slightly further back into the year. It actually also supports officer capacity. Trying to run two consultations at the same time is quite problematic. So it gives officers a little bit of time, and so therefore the revised timeline moves that back to the October period to commence the statutory consultation.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Pauline.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, John. I'd just like to acknowledge the time taken with my fellow councillors, the ward manager and the education teams to discuss the requirement for the statutory consultation for Carstairs Primary to be extended, and the dates look to be around October 21. This will allow the Community Council and the wider community to engage regarding the future of the school. I can confirm that the Community Council and the local community and stakeholders understand that the new extended timeline of the consultation process will offer them the summer to consult fully and therefore put the future of the Carstairs community and the school at the top of their agenda. This long-term sustainability, the long-term sustainability of the school and the wider area as a whole is paramount at present, with all that's going on up in the Carstairs area with wind farms and forestry. And I'm sure my fellow councillors will agree. But thank you very much, John and Chair, for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And here comes Jeff, I believe. Jeff, are you with us?
Yeah, unfortunately, our internet seems to have gone down permanently at the moment, so it's on the iPhone.
Are you happy to continue to chair, Jeff? Because I'm here if you need me to step in.
Well, do you want to take over just in case this goes down as well?
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to continue then. Right. So we're just on item 13. Did we agree the recommendations? Sorry, I think I got. So could we go back to the, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, are we in 13? I thought we were in 12.
Yeah, we are on 12. Sorry, Willie, I moved on too soon. I don't think we went to the recommendations because Jeff appeared and I got fairly excited. So if we could
I was
go
sharing
to
your excitement, Rose.
My God, Rose, you've got problems.
Coming out.
You got it, yeah. So we'll move to the recommendations, please. We're asked to note 2.1 that informal engagement with the community and ward members has taken place, and 2.2 agree the revised statutory closure consultation timeline.
Agreed.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to item 13. So this is the transformation update, partnerships and school management arrangements. I'm just trying to read on my phone at the moment the chair's notes. Just give me one moment. It's very small. Okay, so at the March committee, members agreed the management arrangements for Dumfries and Galloway school strategic framework, which set out guiding principles for partnering our schools. This framework allowed for all existing arrangements to be reviewed with the same criteria applied on a fair and consistent basis. The following report provides members with an update on the proposed application of the management arrangements for Dumfries and Galloway Schools strategic framework. Members will receive an updated report in the autumn of 2021, which will outline any financial implications of and mitigations for the implementation of the revised partnership arrangements following the application of the framework. So, members. So, Willie, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Ross. I can get rid of the sweat from my brow now that you've returned to item 13. This is an issue that affects one, or rather a triple arrangement with three, or an arrangement with three schools in the west of the region that I know of, if not others, but definitely a triple arrangement. And when we set up the cluster schools, there was great anxiety as to whether it would work with the three schools. And to be fair, it has worked tremendously, and I pay tribute to the staff that made it work in the way that it has. So now there's an anxiety. I've had two representations made to me, one saying that they would like the arrangement to remain as a triple arrangement, and I've had another that says that they would like a review. in this respect, Chair, I would hope that before we do anything, notwithstanding what you said, that a report will come back, I think you said in the autumn, that we must, it's imperative that we enter into consultation discussion with any schools that are affected by the arrangement of the transformation of teachers to children, etc. And in my particular case, it would be with the triple school west of the region. We do need to be speaking to all schools that are going to be affected sooner rather than later, and not wait till the autumn for a report to come in, so that all the parents that could be affected, I'm not saying they will be, but that could be affected, get the opportunity to put forward how they feel about the whole change, and if change is going to happen. It may not, and that's why I'm saying it's imperative that we get that consultation going as soon as possible.
John, can I ask you to come in on that one?
Absolutely, and thanks for that, Councillor Scobie, and really, really important points that were raised there by yourself, and these are absolutely at the forefront of our moving forward. I suppose in some respects, we've got to be careful in terms of timing here, and I accept entirely that engagement's important, and I would use that word rather than consultation. We will not go through a consultation mandate to consult with all of the schools. We cannot do that because, as I explained to committee in March, that when we look at our schools across the piece in Dumfries and Galloway, it is a spider's web, and you cannot ping one part of the web without there being a ripple effect right across the piece. So that's why the strategic framework was introduced that members agreed to in March, in order that we could look at all of our schools with the same lens. So therefore there was a consistency and approach that was equitable and fair and transparent. However, having said that, as we've worked with our trade union colleagues and other head teachers, when we've looked at some of the implications of potential scenarios, and please, I'm using that phrase carefully, it has probably led to more questions than maybe we had originally anticipated. And that's why at this committee, we haven't brought almost that fait accompli, this is what it will look like. We still have some work to do, and that'll be the work that we'll do over the summer break, the recess, and we'll also do some of that work before we bring a further paper back to committee in terms of what that looks like and what it could look like across the piece. As you've noted within the paper, there will be an increase potentially with the current framework of an additional 4 head teachers, despite the fact we're changing only the partnerships by 2, because you'll remember the criteria also meant that some schools that were currently partnered potentially would move out of partnership arrangements. So therefore, we need to consider some of the implications of that, whether that's about redeployment of staff, whether it's about financial impact to the council, etc., etc. So that's the work that we'll be taking forward now. And so therefore, rather than engage with communities now where we don't know what we don't know, and so therefore we might set some hairs running that we don't require to set. We'd rather actually have committee agreeing to what those partnerships look like in the autumn, and it will be October, and apologies on the first page in the recommendations, it does say September. It will be the October committee. We'd rather have that set and members have got clarity around about what that looks like, at which point, and as a part of that reductionist approach, this is very much about maintaining stability within our schools. This is very much about ensuring that we have got the same class teachers in front of the children. That is the key driver, that's the key aspect that we wanted to make sure wasn't changing. Our head teachers may have slightly different arrangements for some of them anyway, in terms of what they need to manage, but ultimately the continuity of learning and teaching for our young people is critical to this, and also that maintenance of rural education for our young people. And just to close before open up to further questions, I think ultimately this paper is to try and help us be in the best position we can be when we look at those wider transformational activities that we are going to have to undertake as we move forward as a council. So, for example, as you know, members, we've already looked at our school models and what does that actually mean, and this is an important part of that. But it's also about what do we do with the schools that we've actually got there, and some of the questions that we had earlier through the digital approaches, through the virtual desktop, is about the what and the how we deliver learning to our young people. So This is about trying to get our ducks lined up, if you like, you know, the deck chair sorted out in order that we're in a good position moving forward as transformation moves into the next phase as we move out of the COVID pandemic.
Could I come back, Chair?
Briefly, Willie.
Yeah,
thank you.
And it is an emotive issue, given where we're at just now, the length of time it has taken to get where we're at. But, you know, John refers to engagement rather than consultation. I'm afraid the hair's running, John. It's gone. And it's within the schools that could be affected. And I said that in my opening remarks. Now, the strategic framework, we need to be engaging, and I'll use your word rather than what you prefer, rather than consultation, because there could be potential scenarios that affect the schools. But nevertheless, it's stability that they've got just now, and that could affect. I did say that I had 2 representations made to me, one in favour of maintaining the status quo, the other saying that they welcome a review. I think we need to be engaging with the schools that could be affected, and we need to do that sooner than later. And I'm sure, Chair, you would echo those sentiments, given the schools that are involved and what it could mean to those 3 schools.
I'll bring John back in at the moment. John.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Appreciate that. Thanks, Rose. Yeah, absolutely. Stability is critical, but clearly at the moment we don't have a particularly stable position, and I think that's one of the real drivers behind this paper and this approach to move forward, because ultimately we've just had a very brief conversation about the challenges that Carsfairn is going through at the moment. It's currently a mothballed school. We've already seen Mousel closing. We know that some of our schools, the pupil roll is decreasing dramatically, but also some of our schools are increasing in terms of pupil roll. So stability is absolutely what we're looking for. And having an agreed framework, which I was delighted that members approved in March, allows us then to have that stable background. So at least we're making decisions which are based on foundation rather than what we decide at the time to do with those schools. And I think the other point I really wanted to make round about that is communication is critical here. And as I said before, we don't know what we don't know sometimes, and it's only when you actually do the scenario planning about, well, what would this actually look like? What would the impact potentially be? So I was clear, and I'm working with my trade union colleagues on this to ensure that we're trying to provide communication. I sent something out to schools earlier this week, I think it was. No, what day are we on today? Tuesday? It was last week. Sorry, the days are all blurring just now. Apologies. It was last week, to ensure that that's been cascaded through the head teachers, making sure that communication with head teachers is clear, and then speaking to the parent councils through a regular communication method as well. But there is an element of, it's absolutely what you said there, we don't want to set the hairs running in some areas when we don't need to, but for others there are concerns and there are questions that they want to have answered round about that. One of the things that we did do briefly was to pause the appointments to head teacher positions in a couple of places. But again, because of the time scale and because we are going to require head teachers anyway, we've actually restarted those and progressed those, and we'll be progressing those now and actually into the new term as well. So hopefully that provides members with that reassurance that in terms of communication and engagement, we're absolutely on the front foot on this one, because that's critical to ensure that this works really well.
Thank you, John. I'll bring in Davy Stitt, and I see that Jeff, you back online. Are you wishing to take over as chair?
You carry on, Rose.
Okay, Davy Stitt, please.
Very much. It's a wee query, John, in the bottom of page 149 at 3.2, the bottom bullet point. It's about travelling significant distance, 20 miles. Is that a misprint or a... Because I was thinking if you're travelling 20 miles, that's the equivalent of going from Dalbeattie to Kirkcudbright.
John, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So sorry, just was missing my button there. Councillor, thanks for that. Yeah, the 20 miles is almost that protection to try and ensure whatever we do, we bring it within that 20-mile limit wherever we can. Currently, we've got some head teachers travelling 34 miles each way. Sorry, not each way. 34 miles is a round trip between schools, and we would wish to try and avoid that wherever we possibly can. As I say, these are guiding principles. They're not always feasible in every situation. And again, if there are any exceptions to some of those, we'll bring that to members' attention if we're unable to apply every principle in every occasion. But these are absolutely the principles we're trying to adhere to when we review how our schools are actually partnered. So hopefully that provides that reassurance. But yeah, the distances in Dumfries and Galloway are significant between our schools, and sometimes our partnering of schools, and that's one of the reasons that we described the cluster approach not always being the most appropriate, because actually there was a school that was just literally over the catchment, if you like, which was much closer and more aligned, there were more similarities to those schools, and therefore that partnership approach might have been better than almost falsely creating something that was the other side of the secondary school, and therefore creating a fairly large mileage between the schools.
Well, many thanks, John. Cheers.
Thank you, John. I don't see any more comments or questions at the moment, so we'll move on to the recommendations. So we're asked to note 2.1, the increased number of partnerships that would result from the application of the strategic framework. 2.2, agree to receive an updated report. It won't be September though, will it? It'll be October. With the financial implications and all of that. 2.3, note that a short life working group involving representation from head teachers, principal teachers, negotiating committee for teachers and non-teaching trade unions will be formed. And 2.4, agree to receive a further report in October 2021. Members?
Agreed.
Chair, it refers to, if I'm looking at that, it refers to a report in September.
Yeah, the meeting is going to be in October, Willie. We've changed the dates of the meetings.
Yeah, and could we just note that, just to what I was saying, that we do enter into communication, engage with the schools that could be affected. Could we put that down? Because I think it's crucial that we do that. It's imperative that we do that if we're ever going to take a community with us. And in this case, it's more than one community.
I think you've made your point, and I think John explained that very, very clearly. So, yes. Okay.
And also a note for audit purposes, Chair.
So we can add that as a note, please.
Thank you.
Okay. John.
Chair, just to go back on that, just to make sure I'm really clear on this, if that's okay. Ultimately, as I said before, we don't know what we don't know, so therefore it's difficult then to create a communication when the school may or may not be impacted on any potential changes. If it's okay with committee, I would rather make sure that we continue to provide as officers regular updates in terms of the communication flow to schools, and that we will absolutely engage with schools that may be impacted following the committee decision in October.
I think that's been made very clearly. So we've agreed the recommendations as written.
Agreed.
Can I just note my dissent here, because I would rather we should have a fair idea how many schools are affected, and we really should. It's imperative we consult, or we engage, rather. I'll use John's phraseology. We will engage with those communities that are going to be affected, rather than wait and they would see this as a fait accompli. I don't want that to happen.
I think it's been made very clear in the committee from John, and that we are going to engage with the school communities.
As long as that's clear, Chair.
I'm clear about it. I think the committee are clear. So thank you. So we're going to move on now to item 14, which is climate change and learning for sustainability and outdoor learning. And I will just quickly give you an update. This report updates members on the progress of learning for sustainability in support of the Council's Climate Emergency Declaration. The report provides an update on learning for sustainability developments since the March 2020 report, including the focused work on outdoor learning. And I think David Maxwell is here, and I'm sure he will lead us ably through the progress.
Thank you, Ross, and good afternoon, members. Ross, I don't really have anything else to add to the contents of the report. You've got that there in front of you. I really would like to take a minute or two, though, to highlight the partnership working that we've been involved in terms of both climate change and learning for sustainability. Obviously, climate change and sustainability are not something that we can address completely ourselves as education. We need to be working across the whole council and indeed the whole government landscape to work on these areas. So just really to highlight to the committee the wide range of partners, local and national, that are involved in the Learning for Sustainability Partnership Group that we've created. We've had a couple of successful meetings recently. Part of that work, in particular strength, has been the work across the council departments and different council directorates. We've worked closely with colleagues in active travel. We've been working closely with colleagues in the new household waste and recycling service, and also working with our council's own climate emergency officer. And those have been particular positives around the partnership working within our own council. I'd also like to highlight quickly just the really good pieces of work that we've been engaged with Dumfries and Galloway Outdoor and Woodland Learning. And Ross, you know that you've been part of those groups that as we've been meeting that committee. We've really engaged well with the Dumfries and Galloway Outdoor and Woodland Learning. That's the DG OWL group. And they have been working with us in really, really effective partnerships on a range of projects this year. And you'll note from the report, we've got some projects planned to be working with DG OWL members next session as well. And we very much value their contribution. They are experts in outdoor learning, and we value the contribution that they can make to our schools and to our group. So we'd just like to acknowledge that and thank them for that. But I'm now willing to take any questions from anyone on the committee. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, David. It certainly has been an eye-opener and brilliant work from our partners. So has anybody got any questions or comments? Okay, I'm just checking here. So Willie, you're in first.
Yeah, Chair, welcome the report and all the work that has been done by whoever it was that has done it. I'm just slightly disappointed in all that good work and looking at our outdoor space, and this is across our whole school estate, and how we could take advantage of that outdoor space and outdoor learning to include that into maybe our nurseries and how we could provide for that. So I think there's a missed opportunity in there in terms of the outdoor space, what would be required for all our schools in terms of not only our primaries from primary 1 onward, but also our nurseries. And I would hope that we would get an adjunct, an addendum to the paper at some time in the near future to look at how we use the outdoor learning space for our nurseries as well. And I would really seek that assurance from you, Chair. Thank you, Willie.
David, did you want to speak to that?
I think, Willie, absolutely, that assurance is there. The narrative that you would see, which is Appendix 4, is not just for primary schools, that's for all of our practitioners, early years, primary and secondary. So in terms of the work that we have done and the building of that knowledge for our staff and pedagogical approach of outdoor learning, that's for all our settings from nursery, primary and secondary. Some of the other projects outlined in the paper are very much primary because DG OWL were successful in finding some funding from OWL Scotland to run some projects, and those projects do have a particular focus on primary schools. But we will continue to work with Rosie, who I know was in the meeting earlier, from early years, and work with other colleagues on outdoor pedagogy from early years all the way through school, because particularly important, we would like to consider how we move forward with outdoor learning in our secondary settings as well, and really make it a 3 to 18 pedagogy. So Willie, yes, I take your point, I acknowledge that, and really just to outline that, yes, that is something that we will take cognizance of as we take learning for sustainability and outdoor learning forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mrs. Irving, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't have a camera with me today. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes. It was really just to say this has been a really welcome document, and as one of the primary teaching staff who've joined the team on GLOW, it's such a valuable resource for us. My class were involved in meeting with the recycling team in school online, and it was such a fantastic experience. I would highly recommend it to everybody. Really, my question is to do with the funding for it, David. Obviously, I'm really keen on getting children outside, having come from nursery where we were outdoors every single day. It's much more difficult up the school, and I'm wondering if there is some support somewhere that can be shared with practitioners about sources of funding, you know, for the waterproof clothing, for better seating, outdoor classrooms, etc. That would allow us to access outdoors more and to use it more purposefully than just going out for a little jolly, which is what a lot of staff use it for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, Julie, thank you for that, and for those positive comments. I'll certainly feed those back to the group when we next meet. I did spot Gatehouse Primary School on Twitter, and you were involved in the recycling talk from our recycling colleagues. So again, I acknowledge that one. In terms of funding, we continue as lots of this work sits with the DG STEM team. So you know, Julie, as a DG STEM team, we continue to promote funding opportunities, professional learning opportunities that are out there, and we will continue to do that through our termly newsletters and through our STEM and LFS contacts that we have with schools and through our communication channels. So if there are funding streams out there available locally or nationally, we will share those with you. We recently shared one for secondary schools from the Holyrood Trust, who are looking to develop some funding streams. Now that's a particular funding stream aimed at 15 to 24-year-olds, but we shared that one quite recently through our networks. We also quite recently shared with you some government funding through the COVID recovery outdoor funding. That funding stream has now closed, actually, and I was fortunate enough to sit on the national panel for that one to look at the bids and score the bids for that one. So we do have some Dumfries and Galloway schools and partners that have been successful in that funding, and they will be working to develop their outdoor spaces and their outdoor resources with that funding. So I suppose, Julie, my short answer is we will continue to provide you with any information as and when we get it through our own networks. And again, I think working with DG OWL, they have been successful in gaining funding from the OWL Scotland network. That funding, you will read from the report, is allowing us to operate a pilot professional learning programme next year for teachers in 4 settings. And it's also providing them with the opportunity to run 2 transition projects in 2 of our most vulnerable schools, 2 transition projects over the summer that will take place at Northwest Campus and take place at Park. So again, these are funding streams from out with the local authority that our partners have been able to allocate and to find for us. And I guess as we build that partnership, that wider partnership with the range of partners as outlined in Appendix 1, these folks and the third sector will very much have a contribution to make to us in terms of funding streams that open up to them. So it very much, Julie, will be that joint and that partnership working. My final point, Julie, on that one would also be, I think Mel is on the call from the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Forum. That is one of the questions in the survey that we've just asked our parents, is around funding and how parent councils might wish to contribute to funding to support schools with outdoor learning as we move forward as well. That survey closed on Friday past, and Mel is currently looking at the results of that and producing a report for us. And that's a report that we'll bring along at a future meeting to share the findings of that report with you. But certainly funding from parent councils would certainly support outdoor learning work in our schools.
Thank you, David, and thank you very much, Mrs. Irving, for your enthusiasm as well. Okay, Pauline.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's good to meet you, David, and I really do encompass and take on board the points that you've made in your report. I know you're going to all think I'm the next Bear Grylls in the making, but I'm not. I used to work for a company alongside the British Army, and it was a brilliant few years of my life. And we worked with clients that used to come to Dumfries and Galloway, and we worked in the forests and the fields. using all the wildlife, and we learnt how to cross rivers, start fires, shelter build, orienteer, protect ourselves outside, and survival skills. It really was quite an eye-opener for me, and I absolutely loved it. And it was more for people who needed to build confidence. I was actually working for the company, and really looking at it from my point of view, I thought this is a really great opportunity for children. I would love to see something like that across the region. Now, I have spoken in the past to the freelance ranger. I notice her name is not in here. I don't know if you've recruited someone for that, Ros, on this committee, and David at the moment, but she's certainly able to work across some of those sectors that I've mentioned before. And as you know, some of you know in this committee, I have worked with some children who were causing the schools a few challenges, but I took them to standard centres, which was great in itself. But there's definitely an opportunity going forward, David, if there is extra funding, to look at something like that. And I have been in contact by pure chance with another lady that contacted me who is set up as a freelance ranger in the area as well. And of course, our geography and outdoor facilities are brilliant for something like this. So I don't know if you wanted to chat with me offline about it, and I could give you some contacts, but certainly I think going forward for Jim and the team and John, that there could be opportunities here that would really help some of the kids, especially maybe children who have got additional needs, or autism, or issues with confidence and things. So I'd love to talk to you about that, because it's something I'm very passionate about. As I say, I'm not Bear Grylls, but I do love that kind of activity. So give me a buzz or drop me an email, and I can give you some contacts of people that used to work in the area with that sort of thing, and they're very professional.
That's super. Thank you very much for that. I'll take you up on that offer. What I would say is the freelance ranger that you mentioned is the vice chair of DG Owl. So I have quite regular meetings with Elizabeth as vice chair of DG Owl. The DG Owl group represent a number of providers like Elizabeth and like other providers in the local area. So the DG Owl are the umbrella group for a number of outdoor learning providers. So many of our local outdoor learning providers are members of DG Owl, and certainly around 6 or 7 of them have worked with us over the last 3 months or so on these papers that we've shared. But equally, I'm very willing to make new connections. This is a new area of remit for me, so I'm still willing to make new connections and identify those local and national partners we can work with. So I'll certainly take you up on that offer and email you later.
We love an adventure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Pauline, and thank you, David. I think that's a really fascinating, Pauline, and very helpful. I think it's also really important to understand that the open learning and outdoor learning is very much about curricular subjects as well. So I think that's been really helpful for me to understand that we're looking at numeracy and achievement and literacy through all these activities, which is really fantastic. And before we go to the recommendations also, I was going to say, David, that we've come up with the idea of having perhaps a workshop for members, because I think this is a really positive idea for us to live and learn as we develop this, and we could involve our partners as well, who will be invaluable in that. So maybe we could add that possibility to the recommendations.
Certainly. Yeah.
Thank you. So any more comments or questions? So we'll move to the recommendations, which is to 2.1, note the formation and membership of the partnership group. 2.2, note the Education and Learning Directorate's Learning for Sustainability Action Plan. 2.3, note the formation of an outdoor learning subgroup and the partnership working which has taken place. 2.4, note the results of the outdoor learning baseline survey and the creation of an outdoor learning narrative. 2.5, agree to receive a further report on the progress of learning for sustainability. And also, if we could add perhaps 2.6 to have a workshop in the future. Thank you, members. So moving on to item 15 now. And this is a report that sets out the proposed basis of John Wallace Trust travel grants to be paid to schools, the Ferguson prizes to be paid to pupils, and supplementary bursaries for individual students attending further education for the academic year 2021. Any questions on this one, please, members? Jim Dempster, please.
Thanks, Ros, Chair. Just a couple of, well, one's an observation. 3.8 on page 198, it talks about an individual travel grant, and yet there's no evidence as to how much that estimated cost of travel might be, and presently online, so it didn't seem to me travel grant would be necessary, but I'll leave it for other members to decide that. 3.7, I'm quite surprised about the number of trips that the schools have taken, given we're supposed to have been locked down for a year. But again, I've no great issue with that. There is one thing I have an issue with, though, and that's in 312, where it talks about, it's in page 199, where it talks about supplementary bursaries, 21 students. It used to be that we got a list of the students' names and addresses. Now, I know this is a public paper, but we could get that information as an exempt paper because we get information like that all the time. There is no way anyone can check which school or which settlement these pupils come from, because it's just a collective 21 bursaries. So I would want at least a list of the schools that, because it could be, there are only two schools, Sanker and Wallace Hall. It could be that 11 pupils from one school are aware of John Wallace Trust and the other pupils in the other school are blissfully unaware of its existence. So I'd want to know at least the number of pupils from each school that qualify, and each settlement, so that if, for example, one small settlement's missed out, there'd be an opportunity to target that settlement just to make sure that the pupils are aware that they can make application, because it's a very small amount of pupils given the number of pupils that are leaving Wallace Hall and Sanker Academy each year and going on to further education. I've always been concerned about that. It's maybe more a reluctance to apply than the information not being provided. But unless elected members get to know where the applications are coming from, they can't do anything to try and target information and make sure that pupils are made aware that these opportunities exist. So I would like an additional paper sent out to all members, but certainly to me, indicating where the 21 pupils come from in terms of the schools they're attending, the settlements they come from, and I think we need to give consideration in the future, in future reporting, to letting members know who these pupils are, because there's no reason why members shouldn't get that kind of information, provided it's exempt to the wider public. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jim. John, could you answer? Yeah, thank you.
I'll try my best. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'll try my best in that one, Councillor Dempster, and thanks for raising those points, and certainly, you know, understand some of the other comments you made earlier regarding the paper. I think some of that detail you're looking for is appropriate in terms of the pupils from each school, and can certainly look to do that. I can ask for that to be provided to you individually after today's committee. I think that potentially we can also identify the settlements, as in where the hometown of the children are, the young people are. I'm not sure about the list of the names, and I need to seek further advice on that one, because there is that obvious risk of GDPR in terms of data being shared. But I can seek further advice on that. But I would, at the moment, be saying I would rather not. But I can certainly seek further advice on that. But certainly happy to give you the information about the schools and the settlements. I think that's safe data to be able to provide. So I can do that offline after the committee. Thank you.
Than's very much, John.
Chair.
Jim, do you want to come back in?
No, just saying thank you very much, Chair. It's really all I want. I know we used to get the names and addresses, which it seems to me odd that it's no longer available, because we're all required to retain confidentiality. But I'm happy the settlements will be absolutely fine, Chair, and thank you again for your indulgence.
Thanks very much. Any more questions from members? Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of the itemed agenda. I do not have any urgent business. Jeff, are you there? Do you have any urgent business?
Chair, you need to decide what to do with 2.5 in the recommendation.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I've done that again, haven't I? Right, so we'll go to the recommendations. 2.1, that the grants paid in respect of the academic year as detailed in 3.12. 2.2, the 11 new applications for supplementary bursaries for the duration of each course. 2.3, the payment of the travel grant allocations to schools for the academic year 2021. 2.4, that the provisional travel grants for academic year 21-22 should stay based on a lump sum of £60 per school, and that a payment of £50 be considered towards travel to and from college for student as part of his employment. Do we have an answer about how much that was?
I think that was the issue in the paper, Chair, that the individual hadn't provided that information. And unless we get it, we shouldn't be giving them, because we might be giving them more than his costs, will actually be giving it. I take it it's a he. I think that's what it says in the paper.
Yeah. Can we hold a decision on that one until we've got that information?
You can delegate it to officers, Chair, but I'd be content with that.
So I'll delegate that to yourselves, John and Jim. Is that okay? And 2.6, make a recommendation on the progression of registration letter from Amazon Smile as detailed in 3.9.
I'd be happy to sign up. It's at no cost, Chair, and it allows folks to make a donation should they feel inclined. Unless officers have a real concern about that, I'd be happy with it, just agreed.
Okay, thumbs up anyway. All right, thank you very much. So, Jeff, do you have any urgent items?
No, I don't, Ros, and thanks for stepping into the breach.
I think you're welcome. So, I think the next meeting is in October, and we'll see you on the other side. And I hope members have a good break if we don't see you before then.
Cheers, members.
Same to you both, cheers.